love and limits are not enemies. Well, what does that mean? Okay. I want you to take a little trip here with me, maybe to your family of origin, or maybe to, if you're married, maybe your relationship now with your spouse and your kids, or maybe in a circle of friends, how you look at a problem with somebody that's struggling, or maybe even inside of your own head, because this problem lives in our heads too. So what the heck am I talking about? Well, love is basically, among many manifestations of love, but basically love is a connection, right? When we love someone, we extend ourselves to be connected to them. And love's deepest expression is in a connection where we become one, really. Even a team that loves each other, a family that loves each other. There's a unity, there's a bonding, there's a connecting, there's a safety in love. Love also represents the expressions of various aspects of love, like when we extend grace to someone, when we forgive someone, when we have compassion, when we have mercy. And underneath it all, in one of the meanings of love, agape, which means unconditional love, we love no matter how somebody is behaving towards us. One of my favorite verses in the Bible says that while we were yet enemies with God, if you were running away from him, or if you didn't care about him, or you didn't even believe in him, or you were actively flipping him off, it says, while we were his enemies, he died for us. So grace really, love isn't conditional in order to have love. So that poses a big problem, doesn't it? Because I just said it had to be unconditional. It has to have mercy. It has to have forgiveness. It has to have acceptance. It has to have forbearance. It has to have long suffering. The Hebrew word for all of this, which one of my favorite verses again, when the Pharisees were trying to be religious, Jesus said, you do all this religious stuff, sacrifices and rituals and all of this religious stuff. You've all heard this. People go to church, but they're jerks, right? I mean, a lot of people not of faith that I talk to, I go, so what's your problem with faith? What is it that you don't like? And they go, well, I went to church, a bunch of hypocrites. My parents just beat me up with it, and on and on. And they have really, really valid, bad experiences. Well, that's right there in the Bible, and Jesus hated that. So it's really not what faith is about, but somehow they think it is, because that's been their experience, and that makes sense, right? But what he said to those people was, go and learn. Yeah, he desired for them to do this. Go and learn what this means. Forget all that ritual stuff you're doing. I didn't come to establish a religion. He said, go and learn what this means, and this is written out of the Old Testament, that I desire hesed. That's a Hebrew word. I desire, and sometimes pronounced kind of chesed. I desire chesed, which means a loyal, abiding love, sometimes translated compassion. That to know God is to know love and compassion. Okay, and if you're going to be a person that life works for, you have to be a person of love or compassion for other people. The opposite of that are sociopaths or psychopaths. So now we got a problem, right? Because once you extend your heart and extend your love and extend your care to someone, what if they start to abuse you? What if they get addicted and the collateral damage of their addiction is wrecking your life? Or what if they're mean to you or acting out or not fulfilling commitments and responsibilities? Well, now I'm stuck being unconditional. Yes, you are in love. But there's another side of this coin, and that's called limits. Now, what are limits? Limits are basically these structures within which and by which love can thrive. So you got water in a glass. We got to have a glass that contains the water, and that's the structure. And it keeps poison out of the water that would make the water undrinkable. And see, that's what limits and expectations within our love. So you don't have to meet the expectation for me to love you, but you have to meet the expectation for us to be able to drink of our love, to experience our relationship. I can't experience the love that I have for you fully if you're beating me up, right? So God unconditionally loves somebody, but one of the ways that he put it all the time, if you're out there worshiping idols and not paying attention to me, that doesn't work for me. And we're not experiencing our love. Or if you're doing all these things that take you away or do things that wreck your life. See, love also cares about the well-being of the other person and would set limits to try to save them from getting outside of the glass. So a limit makes love usable, first of all, and it helps structure life of the ones that we love in order for life to be able to thrive. So here's what a lot of people think. If you love me, you wouldn't be making all these ultimatums. Like I have to be sober to live in the house. Really? It's because I love you that I'm making that expectation. See, love and limits are not enemies at all. A codependence love. Now listen to this. A codependence love makes love not only unusable, but it ends up being destructive for the person who is being loved in an enabling way. Anybody that's ever been in a relationship with an addict knows that. Because your love is causing you to continue to give them money that they go spend on drugs, right? What about a limit that says, I love you, but I'm not going to give you any more money that you spend on drugs. But I do have an expectation for you to get sober for us to be together. Okay, that is a powerful force that takes everything upward. And that's why love and limits aren't opposed to each other. They have to be together. Love must have expectations with it in order for it to be experienced, not for it to exist. You can still love somebody who won't come to the party, and God still loves the whole world, even for people that don't come and benefit from his love by saying yes. Doesn't make his love go away, but it makes the capacity to experience that love go away. I was talking to a good friend a couple of weeks ago, and he says, why can't, I don't understand this Christianity stuff because it's so exclusionary. It's exclusive. If you don't do this, then God's going to, cast you off into darkness forever. Well, so it's not exclusionary at all. God loves everybody and asks them to not exclude themselves from his love. Everybody's invited. God doesn't send anybody to hell. People choose to not be included in the safety net and the party. See, the limit is not against anyone unless it is separated from love. Now, let's go to the other side of the coin. I've been talking about love and why it requires limits. But let's talk about limits and why limits require love. What if have you ever had a relationship where the person just had expectations, but there's no love there? What did it do? It will kill you. That's religion. That's why Jesus yelled back at them to go and learn what this means, that I desire compassion, not sacrifice, not all these rituals. If all we're doing is having, have you ever known a parent that there's just a bunch of rules and a bunch of expectations and the kids doesn't feel understood and doesn't feel cared about, doesn't feel loved? I wrote a book called Changes That Heal. And one of the stories in there about limits without love or truth without grace, is the way the Bible puts it. I admitted a young woman to the hospital one evening, and she was in her early 20s, and she was depressed, and she had been using various drugs. And so her father actually had talked her into, coming into treatment, and her father was with her. And I sat down with both of them. I said, so what's the problem? And he said, well, if she would be living the way she should, she would be saying her prayers, and if she'd be reading the Bible, and if she'd be doing all the stuff, and then she wouldn't have these problems. And he goes off about why she's on drugs, because she's not meeting the expectations, right? The limits. So I listened to him, and I'm looking at this poor girl, and she's just withering before my eyes. I mean, I could see it in her eyes. And so I said, okay, well, let me, I'd like to talk to her for a moment, sir, if you could step outside. And he stepped outside, and he closed the door, and I came back in, sat down, and I looked at her. I said, Susan, you know what? If I had to live with that, I'd take drugs too. And she kind of looked up. She said, what? I said, you heard me. I said, I don't know you live with that. I can see why you're depressed if it's been like that for a long time. And so your dad thinks that if you would just do certain things, you wouldn't be depressed. I have a different opinion. And frankly, I think I'm right and he's wrong. And there are many other reasons why I think you are depressed. And there are many other things that we can do about this. And I think I can help you. But you need to check in. You need to stay here. This is an adults hospital. It's a voluntary admission. You're free to leave if you want to. But I would really like you to stay. She said, okay. She did very well. But the point being, she was living with expectations and limits and truth without grace, or limits without love. See, love empowers us and enables us and makes us want to meet the expectations. If all you have is rules and expectations, you certainly don't have what Jesus came to tell us, to invite us to. And you don't even have what a normal person would do, where it's just expectations with no love. They're not enemies. They're friends. But see, we perceive them as enemies, don't we? You don't believe that? Well, I wish I had a video of you when you were a toddler. Because first time you heard the word no, hopefully from somebody that loved you like a parent, you screamed. You threw a tantrum. You had to have your, how can you love me if you say no to me? Because I love you. Say, no, you're not going to run out in the street. Sorry, I love you. I can't let you do that because I love you. I'll never forget the first time we put Olivia in timeout, our oldest daughter. She screamed. Oh my gosh, I thought somebody was going to call Child Protective Services. And Tori was kind of uncomfortable with letting her. I put her in the other room, just let her scream, and told her, when you stop screaming, I'll come back. And so she's screaming. Tori goes, it's long enough, it's long enough, long enough, long enough. And I go, no, it's not long enough yet. Just wait. And after a couple of minutes, you heard the screaming give way to a whimper. I said, okay, now I can go in there. You see, as long as her protest of limits, as Proverbs 19 says, if you rescue an angry person, you only have to do it again tomorrow. If she's throwing a tantrum and I go in there and rescue her out of her anger at the limit, now realizing that there's love behind it, then she's going to fight every limit that ever came in her life and not see it as helpful. But if she realizes the limit is not going to move, and then she gives up and accepts it and gets sad that she has to accept it, because what she was crying about was she just had the first realization that she's not God, that she's not in control of the universe. And that's a bummer. So of course she's sad. So I walked in and said, oh, Libby, I'm so sorry that it feels sad to you. But that's what happens when you do, I can't remember, whatever she had done. I said, so do you know why you had to be in timeout? Yes. Tell me why you had to be in timeout. Well, because I threw the broccoli. I don't know what she did. Who knows? Whatever. Didn't matter. It really doesn't matter what they do. What matters is that you have to teach them love and limits. And said, okay, can you say you're sorry? I'm sorry. Can you say you won't do it again? No, I won't do it again. Okay. Well, that's cool. I love you. Let's go play. Okay, Daddy. And then now, so that's the first beginning that we have, that love and limits go together. And what happens is, if we experience limits over time in a loving environment, then they get integrated in our head. And so then we see a stop sign or a boss tells us to go do something, and we don't interpret it as adversarial. We interpret it as, of course, that's a good thing. So a little bit about love and limits are not enemies. Let me make parenting very simple for you. It's very difficult, but it's pretty simple. And that is this. All the research in the world will tell you the healthiest kids come from environments where there is high warmth, which is love, and high expectations, which are limits. Now, I don't mean expectations to be perfect and go to Harvard or all that. But we do expect you to meet minimum daily requirements of being a human. I was working with a family not too long ago. They were dealing with an addict, and they said something about, well, are our requirements, or they how do you, are they too high? Are we expecting too much? And I go, for someone to be sober is kind of like the minimal daily requirement in order for life to work. No, your requirement is not burdensome. That's what the New Testament says about Jesus. His requirements are not burdensome. I mean, really? Come on. Is it really burdensome when somebody says you got to be kind to people and be honest and be responsible and be faithful? Is that really just too much to ask? Love and limits aren't enemies. They're good for us.